Michella Chester here for NCAA.com. I am joined by Kendall Rogers, who is the co-founder and editor of D1Baseball.com. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kendall.
Yeah, you got it.
Let's jump right into your preseason top 25 rankings. Opening weekend is just right around the corner. Louisville is number one in your preseason top 25. Give me a few reasons why the Cardinals start out
Yeah.
2020 as the top team in the country.
Well, obviously, I think this is a battle-tested club. You look at the fact that, what they've done in terms of their Omaha history lately, their success they've had on the national level. I just think when you look, offensively, they clearly have some holes to fill. But I think when you look at the return of Alex Binelas, I think Lucas Dunn's a guy that's going to have a really nice year for them. And, Justin Levy and Zach Britton are both guys that I kind of circle that could really have nice campaigns, especially Zach Britton. Dan McDonald, their head coach, has raved about Zach Britton over the last couple of years. I think Britton is finally, in that situation, that position to where he kind of take that final step forward in terms of just being a productive player, a productive prospect. And of course, you look at what Louisville has on the mound. Reed Detmers from the left side is as good as anybody in the country, maybe the best in the country. He would have a strong argument. And then you look at the return of Bobby Miller, Luke Smith in the back end of that rotation. A lot of people kind of remember Luke Smith from his intensity against Vanderbilt last year in Omaha. But he pitched really well in that game and pitched well down the stretch. So when you can have Luke Smith as kind of your number three guy, you're in a pretty good position. So I look at the rotation. I look at the back end with Michael Curian and Adam Elliott, two veteran pieces, two productive pieces. Louisville's got it all. I mean, clearly there's some question marks offensively in terms of just replacing some of those holes. But I mean, Louisville is one of those programs that just kind of wash, rinse, repeat. They'll fill those holes.
Let's run through the rest of your top five. Vandy's number two, but then the next three didn't make it out of the regionals last season. So why are those teams such strong contenders this year?
Well, I think Miami kind of got its feet wet last year, getting to that Starkville regional. I think they're battle tested now. You look at offensively, they've got a lot of guys back from Freddie Zamora. You look at Alex Del Castillo. I love his approach. He's a guy that doesn't use batting gloves. He's kind of a chip off the old block. He's got big time power. Alex Terrell over at first base has as big as power as anybody in the country. But I think the big differentiator with Miami this year, I think when you look at what those guys have on the mound, I think Chris McMahon is a prospect and pitcher to follow. He's going to have a big time year for the Canes. Slade Ciccone is another big time arm. And then you have Brian Van Bell, who's kind of one of those. I hate to say it, but like he's kind of one of those college pitchers. Like he's just a guy that's going to throw four pitches, going to pound the zone, and so he's going to be their Friday starter. So they've got a solid rotation. I like the bullpen pieces with kind of Daniel Fetterman leading the way for them. And of course, they have a lot of guys back offensively, so that's why I like Miami. I think Florida's kind of been the most controversial pick because Florida didn't finish last year in our rankings. But solely, I think Kevin O'Sullivan's going to have a really nice club this year. I look for Tommy Mason, Jack Leftwich to pitch really well in that weekend rotation. I think they have big junior campaigns. And then Hunter Barco, the talented freshman, he's gonna be in that number three role, and I think he's gonna be really good. And of course, it all kind of hinges on the offense. But getting Austin Langworthy and guys like that back is really going to help. And I look for Kendrick Kalalau and guys like that, guys that started out last year really well and then just kind of fizzled. Typical freshman stuff. I look for those guys that kind of get things back in order for their sophomore years. And of course, Georgia. I mean, you got to love their weekend rotation. Emerson Hancock, we talked about Reed Detmers being potentially the best pitcher in college baseball. Emerson Hancock has a strong argument as well. He's is exactly the way scouts draw him up. He's a really good pitcher. Then you look on the back end of that rotation. Cole Wilcox is kind of the Garrett Cole starter kit. He's like Cole was in college. He may not be kind of the most dominant guy in the rotation, but he's got a big body. He can get up to 99 with his fastball. The secondary stuff's coming. So when you have a guy like that in your number three role, you're in pretty good shape, I'd say. Then offensively, I really like some of the pieces they have. I think the guy for me that kind of stands out as kind of the catalyst, just in terms of leadership, production at the plate, being consistent in the field, is Cam Shepard. I think getting Cam back at shortstop is absolutely huge for Scott Strickland's club, and I think Georgia has a great season. Of course, Georgia, one of those teams you mentioned, not getting out of a regional. That's two straight years they've been able to do so. 2 years ago was Duke. Last year it was that Cinderella story and kind of Florida State. So can Georgia do it this year? There's certainly reasons to have question marks, but I think these guys are battle tested, and I think they're going to be hungrier than ever, and they should be.
You and Aaron put together your top 25
Yeah.
rankings together. What does it look like in that process? Do you guys have any arguments? Do you agree? Do you value anything differently?
I have to admit, we've honestly never had like a really big argument. It's probably because we're too tired on Sunday night after being at games all weekend to argue about things. But for the most part, we kind of see eye to eye. And so, there'll be instances where maybe he's seen more ACC teams or I've seen more SEC teams to where we're kind of debating the value of, one SEC team versus one ACC team. But for the most part, we kind of see eye to eye.
As the baseball insiders that you guys are, what do you see in store for the season? Is there anything special or different about this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at kind of the powerhouse programs getting back to business. We talked about Miami a minute ago, so I'm not going to reflect on those guys too much. But Miami is just a name brand, and like, can Miami kind of become that national power again? They've been lacking the last few years. And the other one for me is Arizona State. I mean, Arizona State hasn't been to Omaha in several years now, but you look at the return of Spencer Torkelson, Gage Workman. I love what they've got offensively. I think they're going to be much better on the mound with Jason Kelly as their new pitching coach coming in from Washington. So can Arizona State and Miami, for me, the two powerhouse programs, can they get back to business? And also, when you look at Florida State with Mike Martin Jr. taking over for 11, Mike Martin, his dad, does he just not skip a beat? I don't think they will skip a beat. That's certainly one of those things a lot of people around the country will be like, I wonder what Florida State does this year.
You guys have seen a whole lot of baseball. Can you give me your list of guys that we might not know now, but we'll be hearing a lot from in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, I think New Mexico State's Nick Gonzalez is one of those guys. A lot of people don't follow players from Las Cruces, New Mexico, but when you look at the summer that Nick had at the Cape Cod League, he's one of those big time prospects that blossomed over the summer. He could very well be kind of a top 10 draft pick, and so I look at Nick Gonzalez in New Mexico State. Speaking of Nick Gonzalez, a couple weeks in the season, he goes head to head against Asa Lacy from Texas A&M. We talked about Emerson Hancock from Georgia earlier. Asa Lacy from A&M, the lefty, will be a household name. I think Carmen Majinski, a right-handed pitcher from South Carolina, got hurt early in the season last year. But again, another one of those guys that went off over the summer, had a huge summer. He's up to 96, 97 with his fastball. And I also think you look at Cade Cavalli at Oklahoma as another one to watch. Cavalli, a huge arm. Again, like I said earlier about Cole Wilcox, is kind of the way you want him to look if you're a scout. But Cade Cavalli, a guy last year that was up to 95, 96 with his fastball. Really nice curveball. Was a little inconsistent at times, but I talked to someone inside the OU program the other day, and he was up to 99 and 100 the other day in a scrimmage. So Cade Cavalli is another one of those guys I think has a strong year, and that's why he's our Big 12 pitcher of the year coming into the season. So those three guys are kind of the ones I circle that I could see, people around the country needing to pay attention to every single weekend.
How about some guys that might be in the player of the year discussions?
Yeah, I think you got to start with my man Spencer Torkelson over at Arizona State. I saw him the other day. He was doing some batting practice with Bill Walton. That had to be really interesting, by the way. But Spencer Torkelson is a guy to watch. Emerson Hancock. Those two guys for me are probably the two main ones. I think I'd be a little surprised if Spencer Torkelson wasn't the player of the year at the end of the year. But there's some other guys out there. Aaron Sabato from North Carolina is kind of like the Spencer Torkelson starter kit. Like, he's younger than Torque, but he's a guy, again, with huge power. May not have like a specific position, but just huge power, big time production. So Aaron Sabato is another one of those guys that could have a great year. And of course, out of that league, Patrick Bailey. So the list kind of goes on, but those are the main guys for me, specifically Torque and of course Emerson Hancock. And I'll throw Asa Lacy in that mix too. I think Asa Lacy, the lefty from A&M, if he has the kind of year that I think he will, he could be in that discussion.
Okay, and lastly, Kendall, I know you don't typically do a ton of predictions, but do you guys have any projections for who could come out on top this year, or any sleepers for Omaha?
Well, I mean, I guess I've got to go with Louisville, but I will say this. I'm keeping an eye on Texas Tech. I think when you look at the Red Raiders, a lot like Louisville, they've been in Omaha for a few years. So now the feeling around Lubbock is like, hey, we've been to Omaha. We love Omaha. We know how the opening ceremonies go. Now let's win a national championship. And I think when you look at Texas Tech with Micah Dallas on the front of the rotation, you look at the return of John McMillan, the fireballer, on Saturdays, Bryce Bonnin, they're really deep in the bullpen. And I think offensively with Dylan Noisy, Brian Klein, Cody Masters and company back, I think they're going to be really good offensively, even with some question marks. So I think Texas Tech is a team for me that comes in at number 6 in our rankings, but I could easily see a team like Tech winning the national championship this year. I think Tim Tadlock will win a national championship. It's just a matter of when.
And sleepers for Omaha?
I'm going to stay in the Big 12. I think when you look at two sleepers, and I'll add one Pac-12 team too, but I'll look at Texas and TCU. I think when you look at Texas, they're going to be hungry. I mean, you're talking about a Texas program that finished dead last in the Big 12 last year. If that doesn't motivate you, I don't know what will, especially when you're UT. But I think when you look at the return of Ty Madden, I think you look at Bryce Elder. That's a really good 1-2 punch in the week in rotation. Obviously, with three freshmen in the infield, that's a question mark. But Texas has the horses to make a run. TCU kind of a revamped offensive lineup, but Jim Schlossnagle the other day, I was talking to him, and he was saying he might have the deepest pitching staff he's ever had at TCU. Now they may not have that bona fide number one guy, but they've got a lot of quality arms. And when you look back at some of those previous TCU staffs, the fact that he's saying that about it, that's pretty impressive. That speaks volumes. So keep an eye on TCU. And I'll say Arizona's the other team for me. Arizona made a big acquisition in the offseason, getting Nate Yeske, our assistant coach of the year from 2 years ago, to go to Arizona from Oregon State. That was a huge coup for those guys. And they got to improve on the mound. I mean, offensively, they're going to be one of the best teams in the country. But last year, they had an ERA over 6 as a team. And so if Arizona and Yeske, if they can get their ERA down to, let's say, 4.5, like that's going to be a really good team. They almost made the tournament last year with over a 6 ERA. So it gives you an idea of how offensive they were. I would keep an eye on Arizona again. If they can kind of shore things up just a little bit on the mound, I think Arizona could be a definite Omaha team.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kendall, for joining me, and looking forward to a great 2020 baseball season.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks.